Namaste and good afternoon. I'm Marcia Swami Adinadananda. I'm also an instructor for the Temple's Professional Astrology course. Today, I'm going to do a short talk about an important aspect that's happening tomorrow, or you could say right now, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And then I'll give an overview of where the planets are and where they will be in 2021. And then I'll talk about what I think is the most important aspect in 2021, which is Saturn squaring Uranus. The very first thing I want to say, though, is I believe next year is going to be better than this one. 2021 will be better than 2020. This will be based on the separation or the moving apart of the triple conjunction, 3 planets that were quite close together in 2019 and 2020. The Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter, and they'll be moving apart. And we're just on the eve of the very last pattern of this conjunction. So I'll talk about that first. The Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. Actually, I talked about this quite a bit last week at the end of last week's meditation, which is a video on the page at the temple where they record the meditations, or the meditations are recorded. But I'll touch on this briefly again. So the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction takes place on December 21st, which is tomorrow, Monday, December 21st, at 0 degrees Aquarius. So Jupiter and Saturn, and you've read about this in the paper because they've been talking about, when I say the paper, I mean in your news feed, in the news, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is taking place visibly in the sky, where you can see those 2 planets, even though they're quite far apart in terms of their orbit around the sun. From Earth, they appear to be quite close together. And astrologically, tomorrow they make a conjunction in the sign of Aquarius, 0 degrees, right at the beginning of Aquarius. And this is a 20-year cycle. And it has a lot to do with the expansive nature of Jupiter and the constrictive or limiting force of Saturn. And they both are in the same place at the same time. And sometimes they don't always work well together because Jupiter is always trying to expand things. Saturn is always trying to limit things. But when they work well together, big plans can be made. Plans that take a long time to achieve, but they develop slowly as you or your team puts in a sustained effort, and eventually you get that slow, steady growth. And one of the examples we can see right in the news, and when we look at astrology, we also look at symbols in the news to see, well, what's happening now? What's happening right around this symbol, right around this aspect? And the miraculous rolling out of the vaccine is happening right now. Just this week, as we're in this developing news story, it's a big plan, and it's Jupiterian. It has to do with medicine. It has to do with transport across countries. It has to do with foreign countries. It's a very global effort, but it's an effort. And it's something that we've already been told it's going to take place slowly. And then after a time, we're going to see a good result from it as people work together to achieve this goal. So, but it's important to understand, even if I said next year's going to be a much better year, we're still picking up the pieces. We're still in the middle of the coronavirus. We're still in the middle of all this that's happening, but we can see that there's something, this effort that we're doing as humans on this planet, that we're trying to achieve this greater goal of healing, which is wonderful. But you can also see this same Jupiter-Saturn pattern happen with meditation, with our practice of meditation. When a person starts meditating, they do get a very good result or a very good feeling, generally speaking, when they're learning meditation. Oh, that's something that feels good. I'm starting to relax. But I will tell you that it's also something that builds and builds and builds with your consistent practice. It builds over many years to get a wonderful result. So watch for the symbols of things happening that are beginning at this time, that maybe are just in the tiniest beginning, or maybe you're taking your tiniest first step towards a wonderful goal. And you'll see that it's steady, 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 and consistent, but with that hope and that vision for the future. That was what creates a good result from this. So not to get too troubled by, the ups and downs, the roller coaster of everyday life. Things will turn out. Things will grow, they will change, they will develop in a good way. So watch for the benefits to accrue from your meditation, and watch for benefits. If you're looking symbolically at what's happening with this vaccine, watch for the benefits from this push to create a vaccine quickly. Watch for the benefits, the starts and the stops, but also the benefits that come as a development, because this is a 20-year cycle, a 20-year increase in our ability to cure diseases. I think that astrologically, that's the symbol. Kriyananda said that at a time of a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, it's good for us to take some time to reevaluate our long-range goals and what their purpose is in our life. And if it's time to make that sort of a change, and I would say not like a change that happens in an instant, but as you look and you reevaluate and say, where do I want to go for the next 20 years? Then you're saying, what can I do now symbolically to start a new pattern, and how can I move towards that? What are the steps that I need to do to move towards that? So affirm your intentions for the next 20 years, what you want to develop slowly but surely. Let's just take a minute to just sit quietly and to think about this just while we're on this topic, to sit. And you can think about breathing too. Oh, well, you don't have to think about it. You know you're going to do it. But I would say to understand the nature of Jupiter-Saturn as you're breathing, because the in-breath, the expansion of the lungs, is Jupiter. The out-breath, the constriction of the lungs, is Saturn. And breathing in and out, that's life. That's a life pattern. Let's just sit quietly for a moment and contemplate Jupiter, Saturn, and what you want to affirm for the next 20 years. And open your eyes and come back. And let's go for an overview of where the planets are over the next year, just for some things to think about. The planet Pluto is still in the sign of Capricorn. Saturn's moving on into Aquarius, but Pluto's still there. It's in the last third of the sign. And so Pluto is a symbol of transformation, sometimes of radical changes. We've had a lot of radical changes in the last few years, but it's transformation, especially for the people who are born in the last third of Capricorn, the sign Capricorn, last third of the sign Cancer, Aries, and Libra. Long ago, Kriyananda suggested that Pluto in Capricorn is the rise of corporations, and now it's mega global corporations. So watch as an external symbol for that kind of continued transformation in that business sector. And for all of us, reflect on our global interconnectedness, how our vibration, our meditation, our prayers, our intentions are affecting the rest of the world, and also just how we treat people might have an effect on the rest of the world. So that's just something to keep in mind as Pluto continues its journey through the sign of Capricorn. Jupiter and Saturn are both starting their move through the sign of Aquarius. And they're both going to have a somewhat different effect. Now, Jupiter's only going to be in Aquarius for a year. And even part of this coming year, 2021, Jupiter will be already into the sign of Pisces, and then back up into Aquarius, and then go back into Pisces later on. Jupiter's only in a sign for 1 year. So Jupiter is a symbol of learning. Saturn is also a symbol of learning. Jupiter is the symbol of the joy of learning, the exploration of learning. Saturn is the discipline of learning. So Saturn is mastery. Saturn is the time that you put in. Saturn rules the idea of time. And it's time that, again, we're talking about your practice, a practice meaning like you do something every day towards this, whether it's a spiritual goal or a life goal. But Jupiter in particular is learning, and a sign Aquarius is the sign of impart new ideas. It's a sign of science, but it's also a sign of metaphysics, astrology, reincarnation, all the different things that we study at the temple and are studied other places that have to do with being more conscious in life of the symbols that are happening, what's going on, and what's happening internally and externally. So externally, we're seeing as Jupiter and Saturn go into Aquarius, we're seeing a boost in space exploration. We've actually been seeing it over the past X number of years, right? With all these new things with the corporations, where I was talking about Pluto in Capricorn, the rise of the corporations. These as opposed to the government, these corporations are behind a lot of our space exploration. But it's as above, so below. So the Jupiter in Aquarius and the Saturn in Aquarius are inner exploration as well. So find something to study. This sort of I don't want to tell you what to do, but it's a good time to make a commitment to study something, whether it's spiritual scriptures, like I was talking about in last week's noon meditation, or a course of study or astrology, which is wonderful to study, or anything that you feel inspired by Jupiter, or you think, oh, I'm so curious about that. I wonder if I could learn more about it. That type of thing. Follow your bliss, follow your bliss in learning, or follow, if you want to be Saturnian about it, follow what you think is the next thing that you need to learn to achieve your goals. So do both. But when Jupiter's in a sign like Aquarius, it's much easier to learn than when it's in a sign like Capricorn, which is somewhat limiting. So you will find, especially things to study that have to do with philosophy, ideas. Aquarius is a very multicultural, brotherhood type of sign. So first, we're going to get the Jupiter sort of zooming through Aquarius, and we'll be learning. But when Saturn comes through, you have to face reality. So the Saturn and Jupiter are like, wow, wonderful ideas. Saturn comes in and says, well, you can't do everything, pick something, pick something to focus on. And so there'll be some opening up of things, there'll be some limiting of things, but think about, I'm just going to have you close your eyes for 1 or 2 seconds. What do you choose to study this year? And when you study something, it's a good idea to close your eyes every once in a while and think about what you just learned, to try to remember it. So think about what, as you go through the next couple of days, think about what would you like to study. If you could study anything, try to be expansive with your thoughts. You could. It's soon enough you'll face reality, but try to be expansive with your thoughts. Think about what would you like to study, and then after that, think about, well, what's it possible? Can you take some first steps? Can you find some general, like a general book about it? Can you search the internet and go to Wikipedia and learn something about your topic? What would you like to study? I don't know. I love to learn new things. So that's just part of my nature. But it's always good to be learning something new. Now, Neptune is in Pisces. It's in a sign about for 15 years, maybe. And so it's all the way, maybe 2/3 of the way through Pisces. So it's got a little bit more to go in the sign of Pisces. Neptune is at home in Pisces. Pisces is the ocean. Neptune is the ruler of the ocean. And so the sign Pisces has a lot to do with consciousness. And the real question then is, are you awake or are you asleep? Well, hopefully you're awake while you're listening to this, but people do sleep learning. But the problem that we talk about a lot here at the temple is about consciousness. People go through their lives sometimes in a very unconscious way. And in yoga, we're trying to bring ourselves to a point of greater and greater awareness, consciousness, and we're trying to be more conscious, not only in our waking state, but also more conscious and aware in our dream state. That's something that to think about also, to just understand the nature of consciousness, the nature of your own mind. Now, Neptune and Pisces, like I said, it's a long-term aspect, so it's not something you see popping up every day. But for those of you who are attuning not just to meditation, but to the arts, to music, any type of creative endeavor where you're trying to get thoughts from your mind out into reality, Neptune and Pisces can be very helpful. So you can think about, again, what are you trying to create? What would you like to be more creative about? How in your life would you like to be more conscious, more aware, more awake? And sometimes it's helpful to know if you're awake or asleep. So from time to time throughout the day, you can say, am I asleep or am I awake? And sometimes you can have that go into your dream state where all of a sudden in your dream state, you're asking, am I asleep or awake? You go like, oh, I'm asleep, but now I'm conscious. Now that's really interesting type of dreaming. So we'll talk about the sign Uranus in Taurus, the planet Uranus being in Taurus. Where Uranus is now, Uranus is in a sign like about 7 years maybe. And so it's partway, almost halfway through Taurus right now. And so it's in the middle of the sign. We've been experiencing this for like 3 or 4 years. Taurus isn't the sign that Uranus likes the most. It's an Earth. Uranus is the urge to be independent. And Taurus is a very practical, down-to-earth, earthy earth sign. And so Uranus isn't entirely comfortable in Taurus. It wants to be more creative and independent and free to do what it wants when it wants to do it. Uranus wants to be free to do what it wants when it wants to do it. And the sign Taurus just says, get real, be practical. Come on, what do we need to be down to earth here. And when Saturn comes in Aquarius to the point where it's squaring Uranus, there's going to be more of that conflict between Saturn and Uranus. A square is an inharmonious aspect. That's a nice way to say it. It's an aspect of conflict. And Saturn is going to square Uranus several times throughout 2021, and it will be in orbit several times during 2022. But the dates for 2021 are February 17th and May 22nd. Saturn is stationed retrograde, and it'll be close to Uranus then, June 14th and December 24th. So it's important to think about, for an aspect like this, it's important to think about the whole year as a year that is sort of a Saturn square Uranus year. It doesn't mean that every day is going to be that, but Saturn, again, is a confinement, and the urge to confine, the urge to limit, and sometimes it's the urge to make a secure foundation. So Saturn can be really good that way. And Uranus, like I said, is this urge towards independence. So I see it, if you want some symbols for this aspect, I always think about rebellion versus tradition. So sometimes, especially rebellion against authority. Saturn is authority figures. So people are, you have to know what role you play. Are you the authority figure, or are you the rebellious person? So sometimes we jump into those roles. So a lot of times, I think about like a teacher in front of the room and a disruptive student in the back of the room. And I've been both of those. So when I'm up in front of the room, I want order. I want people to listen to me. I want the curriculum to start here and go here in this order. And then there's somebody in the back of the room going, wait a minute, I have a question. I don't like this topic. Can I go to the bathroom? And that's sort of like our everyday mind too. Just like, hey, get me out of here. I don't want to sit in a chair. And I've been that student in the back of the room too, where all of a sudden there's some teacher up in front of the room droning on and on and on. And I just want to get out of there. And I want to read what I want to read. I don't want to study what the teacher wants me to study. So if you can sort of own those two different patterns, then you start to see that in everyday life, and you go like, okay, how do we harmonize these two aspects, these two planets? How can I make them work together? And basically, you have to really see them happening and know that they're happening, and then maybe even take a piece of paper out, which is very Saturn, and a pen, which is very Saturn, and write down, pros and cons of your ideas. You want to be able to do that thing where you're writing down a lot of ideas and not critiquing them, And then you can take the time afterwards, because when Uranus is strong, you're full of great ideas, you're full of creativity, and you want to make sure that you embrace that and not tell yourself, oh, that's a crazy idea. You want to get it down on paper, because when you don't write things down on paper, you don't forget them and you don't do them, and then they're not effective at all. But eventually you will sit down and look at them and go like, well, this idea is not possible. And what's impossible, what's possible, what, you just don't shut yourself down first. Just watch that. And then when you have a great idea, you can add structure to it, which is the Saturn. You could say, okay, here's this idea. What's the first step? What do I need to know? What am I missing? You know, what tools or techniques or education am I missing to make this idea possible? And then, so that happens internally inside of us, but you'll also see it happen externally. So one way is not to share your ideas with other people who you know are going to be like, oh, that's a bad idea. They're going to tell you that's a bad idea. So, you know, people will, with Uranus, which is sudden, unexpected things, you're in this wonderful childlike idea state where you go and you tell somebody the idea and they smack you down. When Saturn is squaring Uranus, especially when Saturn is squaring Uranus, the dates that I gave you, those aren't good days to tell somebody your great new idea. That's when you're the idea person, so you're the Uranus, and then they're the Saturn. That puts them in the Saturn position. You don't want to put somebody in the Saturn position, and you don't want to get that kind of feedback. You want to do it at other times in the year. That's the information that astrology can give you that's so incredibly helpful. But whether you study astrology or not, take time in your day for reflection. Think about your goals. Make your big plans. Work toward them with patience and with gratitude, especially gratitude for the teachings of our guide on the path, Swami Kriya. His advice was always profound and sometimes mystical, but also very practical for living our everyday life in the real world. Let's finish with his prayer for us. May the infinite Lord of love, of life, and laughter bless you at this moment. May each cell of your being and each petal of your mind be touched, be healed, be harmonized. May vim and vigor and vitality be yours. May love and laughter be yours. May you truly find that which you seek. And may you find that which you seek swiftly, surely, and most harmoniously. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you for joining us today. And we'll end with the wonderful mantra that Swami Parananda chose for us for the solstice. Lead us from the unreal to the real, from the darkness to light, and from death to immortality. Namaste.